Nowadays, all you see about WoW is how bad it's become, how disconnected its developers are, and overall how it's a quote-unquote dead game. We know that there are still many people that play this game to this day, but something that the majority can agree on is that it's just a shadow in comparison to its former glory. But can glory be revived in WoW? Is it possible for them to capture that magic again that we all once had when we first started the game? Or is it just too late? Have they strayed too far down this path to a point of no return? Comment below your thoughts and join me as I discuss my opinions on this question and whether the old days are lost to us forever. Before we get into the video, I just want to say that I've tried to cover all of the main aspects in WoW, but if I missed any, please do let me know in the comments. And remember that this video is just my opinion. I'm not a hardcore WoW player doing top end raids, but I have played the game for many years. If your view differs to mine or anyone else's in the comments for that matter, that's great. Let's chat about it, but let's keep it civil, because we all share a passion for WoW, albeit sometimes in different ways, but we all just want to enjoy it again. Now let's get into the video. Take yourself back. It's 2009, you're at school, and all you're doing is staring at the clock, watching each agonisingly slow second tick by. You're waiting for that bell to ring so that you can go, run home, boot up your PC and escape to the World of Warcraft. It's the height of the Wrath of the Lich King expansion. The release of Icecrown Citadel is just around the corner, so you're doing your daily Argent tournament quests, you're doing the daily dungeon runs, you're re-clearing Ulduar and Trial of the Grand Crusader just to get the best gear so that you can prepare yourself for what lies within. For storming the Citadel is no easy feat. The horrors that await shall test us to the very limits. This is the final stand. We march on Icecrown and the Lich King. For those we've lost, and for those who are yet to live, the Lich King's rule must be brought to an end. If any of that brings even the slightest glimmer of nostalgia from within you, then you, like many others, will probably agree with saying it was one of the best times of your life, and most certainly the best time playing Warcraft. When was the last time you felt captivated by the game so much that you waited all day for your chance to play it? When was the last time all of your friends that you knew that played were all online together? And when was the last time you felt like the developers cared for the players? If you don't remember, then you're not alone. I can't remember either. What I do remember is how much I enjoyed the game back then. I remember that I did have so many more friends to talk to and to play the game with, and I remember that I genuinely couldn't wait to play it almost every bit of spare time that I had. From what I can tell, sub numbers are at an all-time low. There's been a mass exodus to other games like Final Fantasy XIV, and the general message going through the community is that we're all just done with their bullshit. I don't want to see WoW fail. I love WoW. It has and always will have a special place in my heart, but I do foresee the eventual death of the game if they continue down the path on which they are walking. But the question is, are they past that point of no return? Can they save the game? It's a bit of a hazy question that will depend on the actions that they take over the coming years, and whether or not they earn back the trust of the most loyal in the player base. For many years, even before the most recent expansions, something that I've seen resounding through the community is the lack of meaningful progress. The progression systems that they introduced are so in-depth and time-consuming, yet come the next patch or the next expansion, all of that time and effort that you spent is practically wasted and thrown away. Imagine going to the gym for 2 years, you get yourself really healthy with a good physique, and then your gym gets rebranded and you wake up with a pot belly and arm like twigs. You wouldn't waste your time doing it. It wouldn't feel worth it, because as soon as the change happens, it all gets stripped away again. Now, as MMORPG players, we're akin to a little bit of a grind here and there. We don't mind as long as it's somewhat enjoyable and rewards us with something that we value. So whether that's cosmetics, combat ability enhancements that alter the way we play, or just generally something fun to show off to friends, if it's meaningful, we'll grind for it. What we won't do, however, is stay grinding unnecessarily for an extra 10 DPS. We won't do something that takes us intentionally longer because of purposely badly designed systems that are just going to be easier in a year due to catch-up mechanics that people have asked for since the alpha and the beta. It doesn't feel good, and everyone seems to be realising that now. So that's one big thing I think the devs or the lead designers, whoever runs the show, needs to work on. Don't force us to play, make us want to play. Relating to the general useless progression that's felt in WoW is another form of progression that's been brought to my attention from someone on my video discussing WoW in 14. It's something that I completely agree with, but also, like he said, I do not see this mentioned all too much in other videos like this. And that's the gear progression that you get from token and badge systems, and also from sockets. Anyone who's played WoW for even a while now will know that there used to be a tokens or badges system that you would accrue from doing end game content, whether that's normal dungeons, heroic dungeons, PvP, things like that. And from this you could aim for and target specific gear pieces that you would like to have on your character. And this gave you a strong feeling of self-progression even if you weren't getting the drops that you were hoping for from the instance content such as dungeons or raids. It also seems that sockets were removed for the most part, which I remember being a huge part of the game, where you had to decide whether it was worth socketing the gear yet, or you were going to change it out very soon, or which gems you should socket to make sure that you hit your caps, like crit, etc. And it's just that extra bit of side progression which in my opinion felt quite good to do when you received that socketed gear, and just that extra bit of something that helped you feel like your character was still improving and still getting better. As they said in the comment, 14 has a token system in the form of tomestones, and a socket system in the form of materia. And both of these very much feel just like they did in WoW, so the old badger system just a little more streamlined and a bit more user friendly. So for example, having the poetic tomestones, they're for any non-max level gear, and then each expansion you'll get specific tomestones for the top end gear, so that's Allegory and Revelations for example in Shadowbringers. But come Endwalker, this gear will now be available just for poetics, which are far more easy to attain, and so you can either use it for leveling gear or even just for cosmetics. As for the materia system, it's almost exactly the same as what gems were. You get the materia which can be crafted, and you get some gear which has sockets, and you use those sockets with the materia that you think fits your character best. I feel some form of guaranteed progression like this is needed to be brought back to WoW, because it will help those people such as myself who feel that they're grinding and getting little to no rewards from it, and just in general make it feel a lot less slow and stale. So on to something slightly different to the previous point. When many people discuss the community of WoW, they often describe it as one of the most toxic communities on the internet. And why is this? When it's a game designed around group-based content, why wouldn't people be understanding and cooperate? Well, I think it's because of that progression system that we've already talked about, through those monotonous systems. If you're having to spend every waking minute of the game doing everything you can just to slightly increase your power, and somebody else is getting in the way of you doing that, it can start to create hostility towards that person. Think, for example, if you were writing an essay for college or school, and halfway through, somebody decided to just erase it. So you start writing it out again, you get a little bit further this time, but then it just gets erased again. You've spent your time writing it out twice now, and yet you're still no further along than you were when you started, all because this person keeps resetting your progress. It's no wonder this angers people when so much is tied to this minuscule progress that takes such a long time to achieve. In comparison with something like Final Fantasy XIV, there's a much bigger feeling of the developers respecting your time, so it doesn't make every waking moment feel so important. So for the majority, they don't mind spending that extra bit of time to help someone, or even progress on a boss, because they just enjoy the content for what it is, not just how much extra DPS they can do after they've done it. So naturally this does tie into the last point about just the meaningless progression, since if people weren't stressed about making every moment be worthwhile, then I do believe that the community on a whole would be much more welcoming and friendly like what it is in 14. In WoW, something that does help people stay attached is the lore. So many people watch videos from people like Novel, they purchase the books to really delve into the story surrounding the game. However, as mentioned in a previous video, this is the primary way of receiving story in WoW. As far as the game story goes, the cinematics are relatively poor, I think the writing's atrocious, and just overall completely unsatisfying. A lot of the stuff that happens in the overarching story gets told to you either by one huge wall of text which is so boring that nobody reads them, or from these external sources. Many people have a massive attachment to so many characters in the WoW universe, but for the majority this is from the original Warcraft games, not from the World of Warcraft as it is now. And to me this makes it quite hard to feel a part of the world and begin to enjoy the new characters introduced into the game. Overall, it just makes me feel largely detached from the story, the world, and my role to play within it. I'm not saying that WoW needs something so heavily story focused such as Final Fantasy XIV, but there's got to be an improvement somewhere. This might be hard considering that we've been fighting cosmic enemies such as Sargeras, and you can't really find anything that will pose a similar level threat without making it completely out there and wacky, to a point where you can't take it seriously as a player. And I'm no award-winning author, so I don't know which route WoW should take, but I do think that it needs to be addressed so that players can receive at minimum a well-written, cohesive plot throughout their time in the game. Combat in WoW is one of the more impressive parts of the game. It's fluid, responsive, and does everything you would expect from a AAA MMORPG. One of the biggest issues with it for me though is that it's incredibly unbalanced. And I feel that this creates further toxicity because you might want to play a certain class or a certain spec, but that leaves you unviable for the majority of the end game content. And you have to play something that's good, otherwise you'll face a great deal of difficulty when you're trying to participate in content, because the majority of people won't want you there if you're playing these so-called weak classes. This then leads to some classes not being played at all, and then the class fantasy goes down the drain, because the classes that are being played end up receiving the spells which the so-called weak classes would have brought to the table. So it ruins the class identity, you can't play the fantasy that you want, and you're stuck in an overall toxic environment where again you're being forced to do something rather than doing it because you want to do it. But overall the combat in WoW is solid, and I think its issues lie, like I say, more on the side of balancing, and that's both through PvE and PvP, rather than the actual combat itself, though I wouldn't be opposed to them giving a fresh and modern take on their already polished system. I don't have too much experience when it comes to professions, but I have spent a good deal of time trying to get into them in WoW. Now, I've never really found myself getting engrossed in them to the point where I was maxing them out and having fun while doing it. It was all just kind of a huge gold sink for me. But I was mainly doing it in the hopes that once I got to max I could make more gold from them eventually. I think that professions are quite important in an MMORPG because it enables you to be self-sufficient and also earn some money for the craft that you've perfected. I think it's especially fun when you can craft special items like cosmetics or mounts from these professions that you can either use for yourself or sell them on. As the professions stand in WoW, I think they're all quite plain and boring. I'm still yet to find a system that really interests me a lot when it comes to crafting and gathering in any game, though I do think the crafting system in ESO was quite fun, at least for the little bit that I played. But in my opinion, WoW's profession system needs a huge overhaul to bring it up to date with the other systems. I've heard a lot of good things about the crafting in New World, and though I've not played it myself, maybe that's something that should be looked into. Now, it's no secret that WoW does and always has had some of the best encounter designs in the industry. Large, epic scale fights that test groups to their limits. And while I agree with that statement for the most part, I do think that they could be better. For me personally, I don't see why it's necessary for us to use add-ons such as Deadly Boss Mods to succeed. Why is it near impossible to just go into a raid, try attacking a boss, learn the mechanics and then get it cleared? Without add-ons, the world first races would last a hell of a lot longer than what they currently do, and I think that a lot of people, particularly people like myself that are more casual, just wouldn't make it through a raid tier. And obviously I'm not a high-end Mythic raider, nor do I know the ins and outs of each mechanic and how they work in general, but is there some sort of way that they design these encounters to make those add-ons necessary? Is there just like a lot of RNG and unpredictability that creates a punishing and unforgiving environment? Or is it just something that's kind of happened over time? I guess from players using the add-on early on and then Blizzard start to cater to the use of the add-on because everybody's using it so that they can still make them challenging. I'm not sure which is true, but what I do know is there's always room for improvement. Other forms of endgame content include Mythic Plus and PvP. With Mythic Plus you progress through keystones each week to get a higher keystone which yields greater rewards, and to be honest this was some of my favourite content in WoW up to a point. Admittedly, I didn't find interest in pushing those crazy high keys, but I enjoyed the slightly more challenging content and getting to run it with my alt characters and do it with friends. I think Mythic Plus would have been a bigger hit if the progression related to it wasn't almost mandatory, and also if it wasn't so heavily reliant on being blessed by the RNG gods. But overall I believe this to be one of WoW's strongest features, and I think to improve they need to kind of solidify those points that made them strong. The challenging content, the fun encounters, and to a point, the affixes that changed how the dungeon was approached, while also adding in some extra incentives other than a small chance at a minor gear upgrade. And lastly we have PvP. So I've dabbled in PvP a few times in the past, but it wasn't something I'd do regularly. The biggest incentive for me in PvP was to gather the gear which either 1, made me look badass, or 2, start to feel stronger against others in the game. The main time I played PvP was back in Cataclysm. As I'm not too familiar with PvP in general, I'm not going to go too in depth with the intricacies of how things work together because I'll be talking in a place where I've just got no idea. But I do like the fact that you can get mounts from it, and I do think that the gear system, in my opinion, was a much more fun way of having the balance. Yeah, you would get stomped by those hardcore PvP players, but in a way you almost respected them for being more powerful, because that's what you aspired to be like. But maybe that's just me and my preference as somebody that doesn't go into PvP all the time. I think in terms of changes, they firstly need to bring out much more variety into the PvP scene. Secondly, the classes do need balancing better, even if that means separate balancing for PvP and PvE. I know I said that I liked it when you could get the better gear so you felt a lot more powerful than those without it, but there were always those cases where if you wanted to play a class that wasn't particularly strong, then go up against somebody with no gear when you've got full gear, but because they're playing this quote-unquote strong class, then you'd more than likely lose. Thirdly, they need to make sure that there's more measures in place for properly punishing uncooperative players, so whether they just sit AFK or purposely do things to try and prevent your team from winning. And finally, I just think they need to bring more incentives to the PvP. Take Final Fantasy XIV for example. The main incentive for people is doing the daily roulette, so that's a random PvP thing every single day. And that first one of the day, you get a big chunk of XP from it. So that just helps incentivize people who wouldn't normally play PvP to do at least one a day, which helps decrease the queue times, of course, just so that they can get that extra bump up in XP for one of their alternative jobs. But I also believe that they need other rewards such as cosmetics, whether that be armor, hairstyles, things like that. And of course, they need to reward mounts as well. I know WoW does reward some mounts for PvP, but hey, you can never have enough of them, can you? So I think I managed to hit most, if not all, of the key points in WoW. Blizzard used to be the innovators in this genre. They were the ones that people wanted to work for. They were the ones that could almost do no wrong in the eyes of their fans, and they were the ones who had that term, a Blizzard quality game. So whether it comes in the form of updates and expansions, or if it's in the form of Final Fantasy's A Realm Reborn, or even in the form of a WoW 2 with a complete fresh slate, Blizzard now has an opportunity to improve and do better, not just for the game but for their employees and their company. Now if those issues are addressed and they do hold themselves accountable for any mistakes that have been made, and can also once again make a fantastic game, then definitely I'll be one of the first stepping foot back in Azeroth. But what about you? Would these points be enough to help you return to World of Warcraft, or are you just done with Blizzard entirely? Let's talk about it in the comment section below. Remember, be civil with each other, drop a like if you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more like this, of course subscribe and hit that bell so you get notified each time I upload. I just want to go out my way and say thank you everyone for the overwhelming support on that first video particularly. Never did I expect it to blow up like that when I uploaded it, so thank you so much to everyone who's watched, commented, liked and even subscribed. It means the world to me, and I hope that I can continue bringing good content to you guys in the future. But for now, take care, be kind to each other, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.